Where's the flash on this?
Today's March 29th in the year 2004. I'm Karen Herman with the Archive of American Television, and it is my great pleasure to be interviewing composer Vic Mizzy at his home in Los Angeles, California.
Say Bel Air, please.
Bel Air.
That's better.
I'd like to take a few minutes and talk about your early years and influences. And our first question is, what was your name at birth?
Victor.
Do you have a middle name?
No middle name. I'm from Brooklyn, and they never use middle names.
Okay. And last name?
Mizzy.
Is it short for anything? Or
No, that's it. The Mizzies. And you want to ask me where I was born? Is that it?
I will.
Okay.
Did you have any nicknames growing up?
Vicky. Everybody added words like, if a guy's name was Nathan, it was Nady. Phil, the name was Philly. Everything was in Brooklyn. That's what they always added the word EE. But everything is Vicky.
When were you born?
I was born January 9th. Never mind the year. Anyway, I was born. Delivered midwife, in those days, there weren't any hospitals around. So that's what I learned. My father never talked about it. And I never knew my mother's birthday, my father's birthday. They came from the other side. And when they died, I had to fill out the death certificate. I put July 4th. I figured that's as good as anything, 1900.
What was your father's name?
Abraham. My mother's name was Gussie.
What did they do?
My father was a tailor, and he had his own tailor store on the block. Then he moved the tailor store to other places. And my mother was a dressmaker. She worked till midnight during the Depression, sewing dresses for $10 because, nobody had money those days. But there was always food on the table. My mother was a good cook, and because of her, I became an aficionado of Tagamet and Phillips Magnesia and other sundries. And, as you were just saying, or you didn't say. So, let me see, what else? Anyway, I was born in Brooklyn. On my second or third birthday, my aunt brought me a toy accordion, and I learned to play it very quickly, tunes on it. So by the time I was 4, my mother decided to buy a piano. And in those days, when you had a son, you had to learn how to play the piano or the violin. If you had a daughter, she usually learned how to play the violin, or she became a bookkeeper. If the son had no talent at all, he became a dentist. Because that was the way it was in those days, because I'm from Brooklyn. And so I wound up taking lessons when I was 4. A friend of the family was a piano tuner, and we bought the piano for $200. It was owned originally by Emmy Destin, Destinn, who was a big opera singer. It was a player piano. So when I used to play a piano roll, I put my hands on a keyboard, and my hands would move. That's how I learned how to play piano. And then I had piano teachers. My first piano teacher, I remember, slapped my hands for some reason, but he always sat there biting his nails. I'll never forget that. I had a gamut of about 6 teachers until the age of 12 and a half, 13. When I became and I was not allowed to play anything popular. I had to play everything classic. I really practiced. I was into Bach's clavichord, which was very difficult to play. And the last teacher, I remember, her name was Miss Right Hand. How do you like that? Strange name. The fact is I could play very well with the left hand. But anyway, that was her name. And when I became a Boy Scout at the age of 12, I started listening to popular music more and playing popular music on the piano. And because of that, my mother used to yell, "What are you playing?" I says, no, it wasn't Begin to Begin. It was it was a Gershwin song or Rodgers and Hart song or something like that. So I wound up being very good at those kind of songs, and I started writing little melodies when I was about 12 and a half, 13. And So I forgot about serious music. I figured that that wasn't going to get me anywhere. I didn't enjoy it really. You know, when you keep playing the same thing over and over. Of course, later on, I appreciated all this music that I was taking because those are the masters.
Were you
Yeah.
considered a prodigy at the time?
Excuse me?
Were you considered a prodigy at the time?
Yes, because the teacher thought I should become a concert pianist. I was really good. Because once you rattle off things like Bach's clavichord or things like that, you're really into it. And don't forget, a lot of the big composers were not in printed in piano form, like Bartok, Schoenberg, you know, all these great composers. And because the music wasn't printed that way, only popular music was printed. That's the only thing I knew. And I knew the songs of everybody, never dreaming that I was going to meet Harry Warren, Sammy Fain, Paul Francis Webster, Kern. You know, I mean, I never thought I'd ever come to meet these people. Frank Lesser. So they were the top composers. But also, I played in bands for weddings, balls, banquets, and there was always a big complaint about me. I remember we played a wedding in Brooklyn, and my friend Danny Stoller was the violinist, and he got the combo of 5 musicians. The father of the bride comes up to us and says, "Why do you have kids playing the piano?" You know, me, because when I was 14, which I was playing about 14, I really looked 9. I really looked very young. He says, so my friend Danny said, well, he's the best piano player around. He says, I'm paying you for grown-ups, you know, something like that. So after he left, I borrowed an eyebrow pencil from a lady, and I painted a mustache here, over here. And about an hour later, the man comes back, and he says, boy, am I glad you got rid of that kid. He said, when I pay money, it's for grown. It was only $5 a man for the whole night, you know. But I remember that I had to use eyebrow pencil because I really looked very young. So that was my youth at that time.
Did you have any brothers or sisters growing up?
Say it again.
Did you have any brothers or sisters growing up?
My brother, yes. He lives in a place called Phoenix, Arizona, in the Del Webb place out there, whatever the heck it's called. Del Webb has places in Las Vegas, Palm Springs, and Florida. And so, and anyway, but he was not musical, but he liked music. My father and mother were not musical, but they liked music. And I was their pride and joy, of course, especially Mom, who, made sure I practiced. What are you playing there? I don't recognize it, I improvise a lot.
Did you have any other hobbies growing up as a kid?
Photography. And that was it. But the thing that changed my whole life was becoming a Boy Scout at the age of 12. My mother and father, they're old school. What is it? Military? They didn't know. But what happened was I was playing accordion. That was my instrument, also, including piano, around campfires. And I remember I went to Boy Scout camp up in Narrowsburg, New York. And I remember it was a big campfire. And Franklin D. Roosevelt showed up in a Roosevelt, and I remember he had a cigarette holder, and he had that lip and that, the way he used to twist his head. I remember that. And I played the accordion. Everybody sang the songs, and I knew a lot of songs about the campfire, and that was a big influence on me, very big influence.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
Composer. And what led to it, which is a very key question that you asked me. I started writing little melodies, but nobody could write words. My words weren't too good at that time. So I remember one of the Boy Scout friends of mine who played saxophone, Cy Helfand, he wrote a lyric to one of my songs. It's just something to fill in. And I kept writing melodies. But what happened was a boy in the neighborhood called Danny Laverne came up to me one day and he says, I know a guy that writes words, Vic. His name is Irving Taylor. Why don't you meet him and see if you can write with him? And I said, okay. I met Irving, and that started a partnership for many years. We wrote a lot of hits together, too, by the way. And we enlisted in the Navy together. We did everything together. And, then, of course, it became phased out. But that started me when I was 14 and a half. I started writing songs with Irving. In fact, one of the songs I wrote was a song called "There's a Faraway Look in Your Eye," which we published, and it was a kind of a hit in those days because Guy Lombardo, Kate Smith, those kind of artists were singing the song, and a lot of bands were playing it. But I was not a member of ASCAP. But ASCAP used to give a prize every quarter for the best song, and we win the prize, but they didn't know because we weren't members, they didn't know where to find us or anything. So they found us, and I became the youngest member of ASCAP. Irving was a couple of years older than I was. But the main thing that happened was that if I can go not chronologically, or I should say chronologically, according to my watch, I entered NYU. I was 16 and a half years old. And the reason I picked NYU was because NYU had great varsity show talk about it. So did Princeton, the Triangle Show, Yale, a couple of more colleges. The varsity shows, they had songwriters, and they had script writers, comedy writers. That was the way. If you wrote a varsity show and it became important, something could happen to you. Because I was writing a lot of songs with Irving Taylor, so 15 and 16. So when I went to NYU, I was taking a general course, and I took biology lab, and what happened was I couldn't stand the smell of formaldehyde. I was cutting up a bullfrog and I always had lead sheets of music. One day, the professor walks out and he says, I've been watching you. What do you do with this? I said, well, I want to write songs for the varsity show. He says, did it ever occur to you to take the music course? I said, biology, French, and all. He says, I know the head of the music department, Philip James. Let me call him. He goes, Philip, I have a young man here. He's a freshman. Send him up. I went upstairs to the piano room where Professor James was. He says, I'm going to play some chords, and I want you to tell me what notes there are. Puts both hands. I guessed every note. He did it a few times. He says, I'll fix it for you to take a music course here. You don't have to worry about it. This will enable you to write the varsity shows. And I got songs in the first varsity show. It was written by two writers that eventually wound up writing for Bob Hope, Freddie Molina and White. I forget his first name. And it's Fritz Molina, and I forget the other guy's first name. And they did write for Bob Hope and other people. And the next year, we wrote all the songs, and we wrote scripts at the same time. And we did everything. There was orchestrations, choreography. We had Skeeter Taub, T-A-U-B. He was a young guy, and he wound up doing the choreography. The varsity shows were astounding successes. Who gets in the elevator during the second year? This fella, Jim Harkins. They call him Uncle Jim. He was an assistant to Fred Allen's. Gets in the elevator and says, can you tell me, I like to meet the people who are doing the varsity show. I says, I'm the guy. Don't look further. Anyway, we meet up with him. He says, we're having a collegiate amateur hour, and we want you to appear to do one of your songs. And we appeared, and the other contestant was a guy called Brooks Bowman. Now, he already had a hit song called Love on a Dime, and he also wrote a song called East of the Sun. They were really hits. He was an older guy. He had a bald head. Then, no laughs, but anyway, So we get on the Fred Allen program, and we win. And what happens? We get a week at the Roxy Theater to do the songs, a few songs, and $100. Well, $100 during the Depression was 50 for me, 50 for Irving Taylor. You know, it was a lot of money, but we're on the way. That started it. And we had a song in the Varsity Show called Your Heart Rhymes with Mine. We had it published. This guy, Jim Harkins, got us to Famous Music, which is Paramount. And we wound up, by the way, when I look up there, I know Yuval is a great photographer. He was one of the assistants on Gone with the Wind, I understand. The Israeli version, of course. Anyway, to make a long story more revolting, that's what happened. I did the Varsity shows, and because we appeared at the Roxy, the people who ran the Roxy Theater wanted us to write special material every week. One thing led to another, and all the big vaudevillians, which was still alive somewhat but fading vaudeville, we started writing special material for a lot of the big vaudeville names. And let me see, what else was I going to say? So at that time, I finished college, and we started getting songs published.
Actually, before that, do you remember the first song that you wrote with Irving Taylor?
Yeah, it was called Sitting on a Sofa with You. Sitting on the sofa with you. There's something I would rather do with you. Sitting on the balcony, I forget right now because it's a long time. But the first, There's a Fire We Look in Your Eye was the first, no, Your Heart Rhymes with Mine. Because of a bad orchestration, the song didn't make it. But There's a Faraway Look in Your Eye did. Then I wrote a song. We started writing songs, getting them published. We had a song called Three Little Sisters. There were three little sisters, each one only in her teens. One loved a soldier, one loved a sailor, and one loved a lad from the Marines. It was wartime. It was very appropriate. Then we were under contract to this publisher, Harry Tenney Music, and he was publishing a lot of our songs. Strangely enough, how does that sound foreboding? I wrote a few songs with Irving that were recorded, which we knew they were being sung and all that. I get, 2.5 years ago, I get a license for one of the songs called, what was the name of the song? I'll think of it. But the other song, another license, Ella Fitzgerald, If It Weren't For You. I never even knew she recorded it. I knew she sang it. So it's out in one of her albums. You know, she's been dead now for a few years. But the other singer was Billie Holiday. And what happened was the guy who produces World Wrestling Federation, he uses her record as the theme song. I didn't even know it. Now here, all this time has gone by. I didn't know that Billy had recorded the song. I knew all the singers. I knew all the band leaders there as a kid because they were all doing my songs. But I never knew they recorded it because there's been a tendency to take off the air records, remaster them digitally, and put it out. Oh, the latest Billie Holiday record. Oh, the latest Ella Fitzgerald record. Ella recorded a song of mine that I wrote with a guy called Milton Drake called Hatta Chocolata. Now, it was not a hit in this country, but in Europe it was a big hit. Hatta Chocolata. Hatta, hatta, chocolata. Flip a dip a whip a cream in the middle of. Anyway, I wrote that with Milton Drake, one of my dear friends. I wrote a lot of songs with Milton Drake. Well, what happened was this. Let's get to the war. That's always a good start, right? From that war to the Iraqi war. I'm not in it, by the way, the Iraqi. I'm staying at home. And I'm staying out of it politically. So at any rate, what happened was the war was happening. We knew we were going to be drafted. The very thought of being in the Army and carrying packs on my back and rifles, that wasn't my idea of war. I wasn't going to trudge and carry stuff, go on hikes. So there was a girl we did special material for called Midge Cox, C-O-X, and she was dating a fella called Sidney Zacharias, and he was chief officer of a little what they call YP boats, yard patrol boats at Staten Island. So I was talking, I said, geez, we got to get in. We better enlist. They're going to draft us for the Army. So Sidney Zacharias says, look, you want to be in the Navy? I'll get you in. P.S. We got a telephone call to report downtown 90 Church Street. We enlist. They examine us. And we have to report the next day at 3 o'clock at Staten Island. I said to Irving Taylor, let's have one good meal at Lindy's restaurant before we leave. You know, I hear Navy food is not that great. We go to Lindy's, have one of these great corned beef sandwiches and potato salad, whatever, and their cheesecake. It was the greatest cheesecake. Well, we report to Staten Island. We have to be measured for uniforms, shoes, underwear, everything. And we were given a cot. Somebody had the lower cot. Irving had the second cot. I was on a third cot. Boy, and climbing up on top, I thought I was going to get a nosebleed. It was so high. Anyway, we go to have our first dinner, and I noticed the sailors are taking their trays and dumping it in a barrel to clean it. Then I said, I don't like the way this stuff smells. I'm not gonna. We already had Lindy's. How the hell can we go eat this food? Well, we didn't. Around 10 o'clock at night, we hear people running. I thought it was an air raid or something. We didn't know. It's wartime. We were at a place that submarines were coming into, battleships, Staten Island. And I yelled to one guy, what's wrong? Of course, what happened? Everybody had the runs. They got sick from the food. I says, why don't you get a doctor? One guy says, I don't need a doctor, I need a cork. So that was my first night in the Navy. Well, we wound up getting in what they call the Welfare Recreation Office. We wound up getting films for the base. We made tie-ins with the motion picture company. We did everything. And then we wrote a show. We got people to act. We had people who were vaudevillians and everything. And we used the band that they had, the Navy band. I orchestrated things. We wrote special songs. And it worked out fine. I was there for 2 years. One day, we thought we were safe. One day, Seaman First Class Vic Mizzy, Seaman First Class Irving Taylor, report to the Yeoman's office. We're being shipped out tomorrow. You're going to Pier 92, which was in Manhattan. That's where they shipped everybody out of there to go overseas to everywhere, Pacific, Atlantic, whatever. Pick your own ocean. Well, there we were. And it happened that at that time I was writing some songs with a fellow called Man Curtis, C-U-R-T-I-S. Manny was a terrific songwriter, and the publisher was always jumping on me and Irving Taylor that we weren't writing too much. Well, Irving Taylor was recently married. He had a beautiful wife, Kay, and, he just didn't feel like writing. He was romantic, as all songwriters are. And I was married. I got married to one of the big singers of that era called Mary Small. I remember seeing her when she was 9 years old. I couldn't believe she was 9 years old. She had a very low register for a young kid. Anyway, we were married, and Irving was married, but she was on the air all the time. She was a very big radio singer. They call her Mary Small, the little girl with the big voice, because she's had a low register. Always had her own shows. And what happened was we had a line up at the Navy base in Manhattan. We had to sign our wills, and Chief Petty Officer says, of course, you know you only have about a 40% chance of coming back. You'll right face, go at the end of the line, put down your beneficiary and this and that. I said to Irving Taylor, that doesn't look good. I don't like to sign wills. Well, we had to do it. And the guy says, you'll line up tomorrow and we'll take it from there. Well, I called up Manny Curtis on the telephone. It was very tough getting a telephone because all telephones were monitored. It was wartime. That was before the Al-Qaeda gang got in. These guys were called Nazis. So anyway, I called up Manny Curtis on the phone. I said, look, Manny, I'm going to meet you. Let's see if we can write a couple of songs because I'm being shipped. It's going to be in the invasion. Irving Taylor was assigned one LST. I was assigned another LST. So we weren't going to go over the same LST. I meet Manny Curtis, and we write 3 songs. I write the lead sheet. One was called My Dreams Are Getting Better All the Time, which was the biggest hit of the war. Another was called Pretty Kitty Blue Eyes. Should I sing a few bars? My dreams are getting better all. Well, what do you know? She smiled at me in my dreams last night. My dreams are getting better all the time. A. B. When she walks along on the street, fellas shout, here, pretty kitty, blue eyes. Geez, I've got to clear my throat through customers or something. Then I wrote another song called No Doubt About It. I mean, no doubt about it, I'm in love with it. We wrote 3. I wrote the lead sheets. I said to Manny, take it tomorrow to the publisher, Santley Joy, see if we can get it recorded.
How long did it take you to write those 3 songs?
We wrote it in about an hour and a half. Then I had to report back to the base. I had to report back before 9 o'clock, before they closed gates. You know, it looked like the whole thing looked like a musical comedy adventure. Well, I get back. The next day we're lined up. Attention! You know, everybody's with the duffel bags. In my duffel bags, I had my another uniform, shorts, socks, and manuscript paper. I figured as long as I'm going to go over, I might as well write music. Even though Irving Taylor was going to be on another LST. We're standing there. A yeoman walks up to the chief petty officer with a paper. Chief petty officer says, Mizzy, Seaman First Class, front and center. Front and center. He says, take this paper to the chief yeoman's office. You're being shipped someplace. I said, where? He says, I don't know. Just go there. I get there, and the chief petty officer there says, you're being shipped to William and Mary College to chaplain school. Why? Who? What? He says, well, there's a shortage of organists. I understand you play the organ, and the chaplains need organists for services. So we're being shipped. And I got on a train, and on this dirty train, we go to Virginia, we go to Williamsburg, get off, report, check in, and I spent a couple of months there. We had to take courses in shorthand, this and that, and I went playing services, not all the time, but 7 o'clock in the morning for Vesper services, they call. It was non-denominational. I had to do it. But we were in the military. There were a lot of people there. Everybody had to play the organ. I was the real good organist. And everybody waited for me to play the organ. What happened?
I would play... Let's stop there to change the tape.
Okay.